up next we've got Jon Lee, Creative Director at 2020. They've just spent a mere 20 years designing guest experiences. So just a little, are you going to be able to sit down for this?
I'll sit down. Is there a clicker?
Oh yeah, hang on.
I will sit down. Hello, everybody. I said I wanted this to be dynamic and moving, and Kate said, just sit down. I was like, okay, we'll sit down. Okay, let's go.
So, Jon, right, as I said in the intro there, you're Creative Director at 2020. You've been designing guest experiences for 2 decades. So, getting to the truth of the matter, you always start with insights, is that right?
Yeah, that's completely right. And we'll take you through a bit of a journey on how our thinking works and what we've been doing over the past sort of 20 to 30 years. But we're a brand strategic experience consultancy. There's lots of words in there that everybody will know and understand. But ultimately what we do is we build brands for venues. And I guess we started really in sport around 2002. We worked with Arsenal. We did the Diamond Club. Then in 2010 we did the WM. And I think we started to change the way hospitality was looked at in venues, and we got a lot of traction, a lot of new clients, and a lot of people sort of thinking about what we do. And I guess we're still working in football and stadiums and venues, and that's really progressed over the sort of 20 years and so. And we're now working with Brighton and Newcastle, which we'll share some work with. But I think what's really interesting is we've kind of ultimately worked in retail for 30 years. So like we really put customer at the heart. It's really interesting listening earlier to Gillian and Claire about people. It's so important, and we'll do a few little insights into that. But customer journeys are really important. Insights are important. What are people doing, thinking about, etc. So we also put, human behaviours are really important. We kind of watch, observe, listen, understand. We do qualitative research. And that really gives us sort of deep insights into the things that we sort of want to sort of build into spaces and environments and experiences. So yeah, there's lots of interesting sort of things there. So the finding the truth bit is really important. We have a process of truth, change, success, but those insights are critical. So we've written some white papers on Gen Z and how Gen Z works in stadium. If anybody wants sort of presentation on that, get in touch. We've just sort of published some stuff on Gen Alpha, which is fascinating. I've got a teenager. We've all got, if you've got teenagers, they are unbelievably inspiring. My son is certainly. And they don't want to work for anybody. They want to work for themselves. 76% of kids at 14 are saying they're going to run their own businesses. So there's a really fascinating insight into these younger audiences, and we look at this and we'll look at that in the work we're doing with clients into venues, and it's fascinating. And as well as that, we'll do tiering, strategy, master planning, all those kind of things that venues need and require. And then some of the stuff we've been doing outer sector, which I think is really interesting, because we bring outer sector information into venues as well. So we've been working with a brand called Leon, which you might know in the UK, which is like a healthy fast food F&B offer, and they just wanted to find some new customers. So we went out into the field, we did qualitative research, we sat down with individuals, and we did this really fascinating kind of ethnographic study where we had sort of 15 different individuals, different consumer, different background, different ages, and we just followed them. We just followed them around for a week. With digital, they would upload all their content, what they eat, what they thought about food, and ultimately from that we found new customers for them, which was really, really exciting. And from that we then worked out, well, what are we going to do in your spaces to kind of communicate and get in touch with this kind of new audience. And then the other sort of thing we've done, which was fascinating, was working with Liverpool Football Club, where we were doing hospitality spaces, and they kind of said, well, we don't really know who we are. And we're like, you're Liverpool Football Club, right? You're quite well known. But they didn't have, as Gillian was talking, they didn't have their brand, they didn't have their values. So we worked really closely with them. We put research out to 3,000 fans, and we found all this fascinating information. They're so passionate. We know what football fans are like. But across the globe, we talked to different sort of people. We talked to attractors, we talked to Everton fans, we talked to some of the players, the coaches, Brendan Rodgers at the time. And there was this whole thing that just kept popping out around, well, we're family. And it's a really strong bond at that club. And lots of clubs have that family connection. But Liverpool was just felt like it was on that edge. And we created this thing around the world's greatest football family, which they're still using today. We created these values that they still use today, and this went through every department and every person in that club to sort of go, well, how do we work with that in our venue? And then from that, we could build a kind of narrative and a story, which is what we absolutely love doing. And we then built a sort of principle and a design language so you can then take some of this thinking into the venue itself, base material palettes. So yeah, really, really fascinating stuff. And then we did things like we followed a fan on a journey to a game, but we sort of spent time with them during that week, so peaks and troughs. So again, you're understanding when the fan is connecting with your club. So there's lots of really, really exciting things that we've worked with there.
I suppose actually that was almost like a nice segue from what the last panel was saying about, it's taking that data, interpreting it in, obviously you would interpret it in a very different way for what you do for guest experience. Did you use anything like that then with the AO Arena project? Or perhaps you can tell us, obviously, lots of press around the new Mez space, which just looks amazing as well there. Yeah,
it's really, we had a brilliant time with ASM, and we've worked closely with them on the AO Arena. And I guess the first project was like, we want to know what the future of suites are, but we need to design it in 2 weeks and build. And we were like, right, okay, let's just whoa, like that's quite a big task. And we wanted to understand, firstly, well, like Manchester's quite an incredible city. It's stunning, it's innovative, it's ever evolving, it's ever changing. So we built a sort of story and a narrative around the DNA of Manchester. And then we kind of did this whole thing with them, like, who are you? What do you stand for? And obviously the Carp Live was coming, so they wanted to kind of progress that. They had like £50 million plus to sort of redevelop the Mez and create a new experience. So, but before we did that, we were like, well, we've got to talk to guests, we've got to talk to suite holders, we've got to understand what these people like, what they don't like. And then we built this really strong, powerful vision for them about being at the heartbeat of Manchester. And then we used the sort of ASM principles to kind of talk about the experience itself, and then wrote a narrative around everything that they had, from their service to their back of house. So everything was then sort of structured and in place for us to then start to think about design. So yeah, that was, and we'll show some of that sort of work at the end, so we'll get into some bit of the creative stuff.
It's a whole journey. And then talking of a journey, I know you did a really in-depth piece actually for the Jockey Club. So perhaps you can take us through that.
Yeah, again, another fantastic organisation that came to us in 2021. They've got this, one of their marquee events, the Derby, which is just such a stunning race. It's been going since the sort of 1800s. And it was kind of losing its way. So we worked with them it's a huge strategic piece of work where we interviewed stakeholders, and we kind of looked at marketing strategies for them, and we looked at sort of the brand itself, and then we took it into experience. But ultimately, they didn't have a brand identity. It was always the sponsors coming in, overtaking the brand itself. So we wanted to create sort of a value proposition for them and some sort of strong pillars of identity to sort of bring the race back to life. It was losing traction, and they have such a wide variety of guests and customers. So you've got the family, you've got the London sort of city people, you've got the travellers, you've got the racing fraternity. It's a really, really kind of broad mix of customer base. So how do you then create a brand that's relevant to everybody and then how do you market that and process it, and how then do you deliver the experience? So it's really complex. And then like, what's the brand, and what's the story, and what's the narrative behind it? And that's where I think we sort of bring in these sort of, that change, you know, that's the sort of thing that we start to evaluate and start to think about in a different way. So we just wrote this wonderful thing that actually this is Racing's most spectacular carnival. These are 3-year-old thoroughbreds. They are the elite of horse racing. If you go to the Derby or if you see horse racing, these creatures are phenomenal. They're beautiful. But actually the Derby's got this incredible opportunity because it's got this open hill, and if the hill's not filled, the experience doesn't really come to life. So we wrote this narrative with them after this proposition about Racing's most spectacular carnival. We landed on those kind of really historical, unmatchable, iconic events. This is like once in a lifetime every year. Every event is different. It's about 2.5 minutes to race. It's a stunning venue and it's a stunning race course. So we built this kind of narrative that they started to use on all sort of touch points. And based on all the information we had from stakeholders, and how can we sort of build this brand, this pure brand, into like an experience. And you know, the landscape pulsates, the colour was really, really important, and we loved this idea that, you know, customers could come and then they take the colour back. So you kind of like, how do we get colour into this experience, and how do we make it much more of a carnival? And there's real kind of tension there, because they keep calling it festival, and we're going, it's a carnival, because there are other festivals, and it worked really beautifully. So Racing's most spectacular carnival, if you look at the pictures, you know, this was shot in the sort of 90s at its height. And then we kind of then build the brand, right? They didn't have a logo, they didn't have an identity. So when we've worked with football clubs before, you can go through the history and go, right, you used to do this, so how do you do this? So we built this beautiful logo, which is this elite horse, but it's got the kind of carnival spirit running behind it. And then the brand itself just came to life through all these wonderful sort of touch points. You've got to have movement in some of this, sort of the way that you do it these days. So, and at the time it was the Kazoo Derby, and then we just worked on every touch point, from website to lanyards to the programme, to the event itself, the customer journey, all those wonderful, wonderful touch points, just to bring this to life. And when we went, it was stunning, because you can only do so much, right? You can only deliver so much, and then everyone gets behind it and delivers it, and that's not us. We're not the operators, we're not the people delivering or doing the printing or doing all those. We can give the guides and how we want it to come to life, and it was just, it blew us away when we turned up. They did such an amazing job. Even the staff had painted their nails in different colours. They really were expressing it, and I think that goes back to understanding who you are, what you stand for, and then delivering that event through every touch point you possibly can. And it's given them the opportunity to sort of move their brand in the right direction. So yeah, really, really excited about that.
And obviously, so far over the last 2 days, we've been sort of talking customer journey, but more from a fan side of things, but bringing it back now to, you know, clubs, venues, etc. So a club, say, you know, obviously you mentioned earlier, Liverpool, you know, they came to you, they said, you know, we need a change, or we need to, you know, redefine ourselves. You know, talk us through that journey. Where do you start? How does it evolve?
I think everyone's different, really, and so some of the work we're going to show now, they're very different approaches, but we'll always sort of start with that insights and try and bring that into the experience. We'll walk customer journeys. Some of the customer journeys don't exist yet because buildings are being built. We couldn't walk the customer journey at Brighton because it didn't exist. We did the Tunnel Club down there, and our friends at KSS helped kind of dig it out and deliver that space for us, and they moved the media seats away so they could create that experience. And then we kind of start that process with the sort of big idea and thinking about how we're going to deliver that environment and experience for every sort of touch point. So the Tunnel Club, for example, you know, there's a few of them in the UK. I think this one is really, really different. It's really intimate. It's only 60 people. It's a beautiful space. And And then the journey, we kind of like work through every touch point from like online to kind of the seat itself. And we'll build all those little touch points into it as well. So it's every little piece, whether it's your landlord, the identity, and how does that work. And the really nice thing about Brighton is it's in the rolling Sussex Downs. You know, we dug out the sort of the chalk and the sandstone around. So we're kind of like, well, let's just use nature to kind of inspire us on this journey to this experience. And then just to sort of bring that to life, it's like a 60 people space environment. It's beautiful, like it's got a beautiful layering sort of copper ceilings in there, but every fan can see the tunnel. I think, you know, some of these tunnel clubs are just too big and they're too expressive, but actually we really focused on that tunnel. There's mirrors in here, so wherever you're sitting, you can see it. You're like literally sitting inside it. And then the club did brilliant things like they brought in Stephen Edwards, Michelin's, Master Chef winner, and local kind of chef. And the menu that he's done is unbelievable. And the feedback from the fans are great. I think the club wished it was a tiny little bit bigger, so they could get a few more people in there. But it's really successful. You've probably seen the padded seat, vote it best experience. But again, we can only do so much. Those guys have delivered that experience day in, day out. They do a brilliant job down there, and we just kind of providing that platform for them to be able to sort of deliver and operate it and make the fans enjoy it. But again, yeah, the nature was fascinating to sort of bring that to life.
And just as I saw that slide come up, that was what I was just about to say. So obviously I was lucky enough to be at Newcastle United earlier this year, just as Wings and Fenex and all those spaces had reopened. You know, and I was there with, unfortunately, Yvette Thompson, commercial venue director from Newcastle United, was due to be with us today. Unfortunately, you know, everyone has jobs as well as coming to nice conferences like this. So unfortunately, she got called into a meeting, but I was there with her and saw the spaces. I think they were literally days old when I saw them. And, you know, the feedback was already spectacular. So, you know, how do you work with clubs like Newcastle to deliver those spaces?
You have to work really closely with them. Again, you're coming into a city and a culture that, you know, you may not be that familiar with. So you've got to immerse yourself. You've got to go to the games. You know, you talk to fans, etc., etc. And they had two. I mean, the stadium's stunning. St James's Park is this. So we also wrote a narrative. It's a cathedral on the hill, etc., etc. It's just a stunning venue. Most of them are, right, when you turn up. But St James's Park has got that character, which is really fascinating. And this was a really fast-paced project. So, like, I think we got the brief in March, and it opened, or April, and it opened in August. So, like, it was quite terrifying, and working with contractors we hadn't worked with. So we were literally on, you know, up there every week, twice a week, and sometimes, but that's fine. That's kind of what we're doing. And the one we're going to show you is Wings. So this is the original space, which was the Leesies. So we could walk the customer journey. It was a space of 400 people, and you come up to sort of central atrium, and you go left and right, and there's two different spaces. And we were like, oh, this is, I mean, it's quite basic at the moment. It was £300, I think, for the season. It's now £300 for a match day. So the opportunity of revenue increase is massive when you put that investment in. And we did everything from new bars, toilets, there was new MEP, ceiling. It was just completely ripped out. Like, the value engineering was not a possibility because they were ripping it out while we were sort of finishing it off. So it's a fascinating space. And we've just built a story around it. We called it Wings. Because of the magpie, but ultimately it was just because there's two sides to this space, and it just felt like it felt like it was a great opportunity to use that. And then you're like, right, they've got some amazing wingers in their history. You know, Solano, Beardsley, Waddle. So we start to tell that story of the wingers, which is again one of those lovely things you can bring to the sort of the table for the fans, which is the most important thing. Like for us, naming is super important. Everything will come off that name, the product, the experience. So we'll write propositions around the experience, the F&B offer, how that works, how it's linked to the club, what's the service and fan benefits. We'll work with the club and Yvette and Colin really, really closely on that. And then we've got a foundation to build a product off. And we'll build that identity into the sort of colour palette. I mean, a bit geeky, but the Magpie is not just black and white. If you look at the wings, it's got all these turquoise, beautiful colours underneath. So we use that as a sort of inspiration. There was a lot of black and white spaces up at Newcastle. We were like, let's just move that on a bit, because we don't have to be black and white. And then we can create, as we said at the beginning, a brand, and a brand that people sort of will fall in love with and go there. Some of the spaces we've done haven't really changed over the years. Diamond Club in 2006 is still the same fit out because of the quality of it. And the brands are still there, you know, because they've got a story behind them, so they last. You don't have to change them, and fans kind of fall in love with them. And I think this is a video of the space. So that's wings.
And there must have been one very happy client if there was 300 a season to 300 a game. That's quite a nice little ROI there. And then finally, to wrap things up, what's next? Crystal ball time.
So we're just going to...
Oh, sorry.
AO Arena.
AO Arena.
It's fine. We'll just flick through that and then we'll... So AO, we just wanted to show you, you know, the sort of the thinking behind it, the Manchester, the DNA, and then it just developed and developed. So we did new VIP journeys, we did the back of house areas, we did a really interesting space called the Terrace, which was actually, we worked with Lisa at First Direct on the gallery there, and you know, there's sort of some comparisons on how those things come to life. And then we did the Mez, which is beautiful space, bar, restaurant, either side. We did all the signage, all the wayfinding. It's a complete transformation of an arena with an incredible history. And we did all the back of house. We just wanted to tell that story to the artists as well as the fans and the guests, that this is an incredible arena with an amazing history. Like Prince, Bowie, they all played there. So we've got to kind of leverage that and bring that to life a little bit. And then this is a sort of, I guess, a first-in-class experience for new guests. Simon Rogan's a chef who's written the menu. It's a stunning, stunning space. But again, we can only do so much. We designed this with the team, with Vicky and the team at Manchester and at ASM. But ultimately, to go back to the very beginning, this is all about the customer and the guest. And this video just shows exactly what they do brilliantly at this arena.
Makes you wanna go. Makes you wanna go. Na 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 na. Put your hands together now. Everybody now. Put your hands together now. Sometimes it hits you when you least expect it. When it feels this good. 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 Makes you wanna go.
Yes, there we go.
It's a and I nearly said as well, obviously, I did see but one of the spaces at First Direct, but I won't steal Lisa's thunder because I know she's going to be talking about that in a panel session later on in the day. But that was a very clever design of a dead space. But as I said, I won't mention it. So final thoughts, where are we going next?
So we are, you might have seen by yourself in the press that we're just now working with Oxford United on their new stadium, which is really super exciting. First electric stadium, really ambitious plans. So we hopefully will be here sometime next year, wherever we are, talking about that. But that's going to be a really, really interesting venue that we're working on, from a venue brand into kind of interiors and experiences. But it's really quite different, and it's kind of quite exciting to better sort of keep that one back. We're just finishing on Aston Villa at the moment, and again, there's sort of 6 new, quite incredible hospitality spaces that we're really looking forward to share. And there's lots more that we're not allowed to talk about, but that's exciting. We just want to, we love what we do and keep working in venues and keep actually talking to fans, customers, guests is what we want to do. So, yeah.
Well, obviously, we can keep everyone posted on what you're doing on Sports Venue Business. And obviously, then we'll have to bring you back in 12 months' time to talk about Oxford and the TBCs. Yeah. All right. Thanks so much, Jon. Thank you.
Thank you.